The massive exploration ship New Horizon floated silently above the purple clouds of Cathera Prime. Inside the bridge, Captain Tay Park watched the scanning reports with growing excitement. His crew had been traveling for 6 months to reach this distant world after receiving strange energy readings from deep space. Dr. Hana Kim stood beside him, holding her research tablet tightly. She was the best xenobiologist in the human fleet and had spent years studying alien life forms. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her dark eyes sparkled with curiosity as she read the data. "The energy signatures are unlike anything we have seen before, Captain," she said in a soft voice. "They appear to be coming from some kind of ancient structure on the planet's surface. The readings suggest it might be thousands of years old." Captain Park nodded slowly. He was a careful man who had led many successful missions into unknown space. But this felt different somehow. The Galactic Council had been very clear about this sector. They claimed it was empty and worthless. Yet here they were looking at clear signs of ancient civilization. "Prepare the landing team," he ordered. "Take Security Chief Jay and Engineer Minho with you, Dr. Kim. I want full scans of whatever you find down there." As the small shuttle descended through the thick atmosphere, Hana felt her heart racing. The planet below was covered in dense jungle broken only by massive stone structures that rose like mountains from the green canopy. The structures were clearly artificial, with smooth walls and geometric patterns that caught the light. The shuttle landed in a clearing near the largest structure. As soon as the doors opened, Hana could feel something strange in the air. It was like a humming sensation that made her skin tingle. The jungle around them was eerily quiet, with no sounds of birds or insects. Security Chief Jay stepped out first with his weapon ready. He was a big man with kind eyes who always put the safety of the crew first. Behind him came Engineer Minho, carrying scanning equipment and looking excited about the technology they might discover. The structure before them was incredible. It rose nearly 1,000 feet into the air, made of some kind of white stone that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Strange symbols covered the walls in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "The entrance is this way." Dr. Kim called Minho from his position near a large archway. His scanners were beeping rapidly as he took readings of the stone. Inside the structure, the air was cool and still. Their footsteps echoed in the vast corridors as they moved deeper into the building. Emergency lights from their equipment cast dancing shadows on the walls, making the alien symbols seem to move and shift. After walking for nearly an hour, they found something that made them all stop and stare. A massive chamber opened before them with a domed ceiling covered in stars that actually twinkled like real sky. But it was not the ceiling that caught their attention. In the center of the room stood dozens of large oval objects arranged in perfect circles. Each object was about the size of a person and had a smooth shell that reflected their lights like mirrors. Hana approached one carefully and placed her hand on the surface. It was warm. "These are eggs," she whispered in amazement. "But eggs from what kind of creature?" Before anyone could answer, a new voice spoke from behind them. The voice was cold and filled with disgust. "Humans should not be here." They turned to see a tall, pale figure emerging from the shadows. It was a Valthari, one of the most powerful races in the Galactic Council. The alien had smooth white skin that seemed to glow and large silver eyes that looked at them with obvious hatred. "I am Veltar of the High Council," he said, his voice like ice. "You primitive creatures have no business disturbing this sacred place. These are dragon eggs from the time before your species crawled from the mud." "Dragon eggs," repeated Hana, taking a step back. "But dragons have been extinct for thousands of years." The Valthari laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Not extinct human. Hidden. Protected from creatures like you who would corrupt their purity with your touch." As if responding to their voices, one of the eggs began to crack. A thin line appeared down the center, growing wider as something pushed from inside. Veltar moved forward quickly, his hands glowing with strange energy. "Stay back," he commanded. "Only those of pure blood may witness the hatching. Your presence here is already an insult to the natural order." But Hana found herself moving closer to the cracking egg. She could not help herself. Something was calling to her from inside that shell. a feeling of longing and hope that made her heartache. The egg split open with a sound like breaking glass. What emerged made everyone gasp, including the proud Valthari. A tiny dragon no bigger than a house cat stumbled out of the shell. But this was not like the dragons in the old stories. Its scales were pure white, almost transparent in the light. Its eyes were pale blue like winter sky, and it seemed small and fragile compared to what they had expected. An albino Veltar said in horror, "A genetic mistake. This creature should not exist." The little dragon looked around the chamber with curious eyes. It saw the tall Valthari reaching toward it with glowing hands and let out a small cry of fear. Then it saw Hana kneeling nearby, and something changed in its expression. Without hesitation, the tiny creature ran across the smooth floor on unsteady legs. It climbed up Hana's arms using tiny claws and pressed itself against her chest. Then it looked up at her with those pale blue eyes and made a soft sound like a purr. The moment their eyes met, Hana felt something incredible happen. A warmth spread through her mind, and she could suddenly sense the little dragon's thoughts. It was scared and alone, but also filled with joy at finding her. In that instant, they both knew they belonged together. "No," screamed Veltar, his perfect composure finally breaking. "Dragons do not choose humans. It is impossible. This creature is defective, broken." But the little dragon only gripped Hana's hand tighter with its tiny claws. It had made its choice, and nothing in the galaxy would change its mind. The bond between human and dragon was formed in that moment, a bond that would shake the foundations of everything the galaxy believed about power, purity, and who was worthy of greatness. And it all began with a little albino dragon who dared to choose love over law. 3 weeks had passed since the little albino dragon had chosen Hana Kim as its partner. The creature had grown rapidly from the size of a house cat to that of a medium dog, but remained much smaller than the ancient records suggested dragons should be. Hana had named it Beol, which meant star in her native Korean language. The dragon followed Hana everywhere aboard the New Horizon. Its white scales had developed a soft glow that pulsed gently when it was content. The crew members had grown fond of the gentle creature, but they all knew trouble was coming. Captain Tay Park stood in his ready room, staring out at the stars. His communication console had been buzzing nonstop with urgent messages from Earth Command and the Galactic Council. Every message demanded the same thing: hand over the dragon and the human who dared to bond with it. A soft chime announced a visitor. Dr. Hana Kim entered with Beol perched on her shoulder like an oversized cat. The dragon eyes were alert and intelligent as it studied the captain. "The Council is sending a fleet," Captain Hana said quietly. "They will be here in 4 days. They want to take Beol away for study and containment." Captain Park turned from the window. His face was tired but determined. "And what do you want to do, Dr. Kim?" Hana looked down at the small dragon who nuzzled against her neck affectionately. "I want to protect him, Captain. He chose me and I chose him back. That should mean something." Before the captain could respond, the door chimed again. Engineer Minho entered carrying a data tablet and looking excited despite the serious situation. His usually neat hair was messy from hours of work in the engine room. "Captain, you need to see this," he said breathlessly. "The dragon, it is doing something incredible to our systems." Minho activated a holographic display that showed the ship's power grid. Where normally the display would show steady lines and predictable patterns now, there were flowing curves and spirals of energy that seemed almost alive. "When Beol is near any of our systems, they work better," he explained. "The engines are 20% more efficient. Our shields are stronger. Even our food processors are creating better meals. It is like the dragon understands our technology better than we do." Captain Park frowned. "How is that possible? Dragons are supposed to be creatures of magic, not technology." Minho shook his head. "That is what the Valthari want everyone to believe. But look at these readings. Beol is not just using magic. He is interfacing directly with our computer systems, creating connections that should not be possible." The small dragon chirped softly and jumped down from Hana's shoulder. It walked over to the captain's desk and placed one tiny paw on the communication console. Immediately, the screen came alive with information streaming faster than any human could read. "He is accessing the galactic databases," Captain Minho whispered in amazement. "Without any kind of physical connection, he is reading information from systems light years away." Suddenly, the door burst open and Security Chief Jay rushed in. His face was grim, and he carried a weapon at his side. "Captain, we have a problem," he announced. 3 Valthari ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They are demanding immediate surrender of the Dragon and Dr. Kim. On the main screen, Captain Park ordered. The bridge view screen activated to show 3 elegant silver ships hanging in space like deadly flowers. Their hull designs were beautiful, but everyone knew the terrible weapons they carried. A new voice filled the bridge as the Valthari opened communication channels. "Captain Park, of the human vessel. I am High Commander Zelani of the Pure Fleet. You will surrender the abomination and its corrupted human immediately." The Valthari who appeared on screen was even more imposing than Veltar had been. Her skin was perfectly white and seemed to glow with inner light. Her silver eyes held no warmth or mercy as she stared at them. "That creature is a genetic mistake," she continued. "It should have been destroyed at birth. By allowing it to bond with a human, you have violated every law of nature and decency." Captain Park stepped forward. "The Dragon chose its partner freely. We will not hand over members of our crew to be imprisoned or harmed." Zelani laughed coldly. "Humans do not understand the sacred bonds between dragons and their chosen ones. Only races of pure blood and noble spirit can form true partnerships with dragonkind. Your species is too primitive and corrupt." As if responding to the insult, Biol began to glow brighter. The little dragon walked to the center of the bridge and spread its small wings. Energy began to flow from its body into the ship's systems, creating patterns of light that danced across every surface. Suddenly, the New Horizon weapon systems came online without anyone touching the controls. The shields strengthened to levels far beyond their normal capacity. The engines hummed with power that made the deck plates vibrate. Minho stared at his instruments in wonder. "Captain, the Dragon is not just interfacing with our systems, it is improving them. Our weapons are now 3 times more powerful than before." Zelani's face showed shock and disgust as she watched the light show on her sensors. "Impossible," she hissed. "Dragons do not lower themselves to work with crude human machinery." But Pilot Sue, who had been quietly watching from her station, called out in excitement. "Captain, the Dragon is teaching me new navigation routes. I can see pathways through space that were never there before." The young pilot eyes were wide with amazement as information flowed directly from Biol into her mind. Charts and star maps that showed shortcuts through hyperspace appeared on her screens. All across the ship, crew members were discovering new capabilities. The medical bay scanners could now detect problems that had been invisible before. The communications array was picking up signals from civilizations that had never been contacted. High Commander Zelani's voice became sharp with anger. "You will surrender that creature immediately or face the consequences. The Galactic Council has declared humans unfit for dragon partnership. That bond is forbidden." Captain Park looked around his bridge at his crew and their small dragon ally. He saw determination in every face and felt the ship's new power humming beneath his feet. "Then our answer is no," he said firmly. "Biol chose us, and we choose to stand by him. If the Council wants to fight over that, then we are ready." The communication channel closed abruptly as the Valthari ships began to power their weapons. But aboard the New Horizon, nobody felt afraid. They had something the enemy did not understand. They had a partnership built on trust instead of domination. And that partnership was about to change everything. The battle began at dawn ship time. High Commander Zelani had given Captain Park one final chance to surrender Biol and Dr. Hana Kim. When he refused, her silver ships opened fire with weapons that could crack planets. But something impossible happened. The energy beams that should have destroyed the New Horizon simply bounced off the shields like rain on glass. Biol stood in the center of the bridge, glowing so brightly that everyone had to shield their eyes. The little dragon was pouring its power directly into the ship systems. Captain Park gripped his command chair as the ship shook under the assault. "All weapons fire," he ordered. "Show them what humans can do." The New Horizon returned fire with beam arrays that blazed with silver light. Where the weapons struck the Valthari shields, they did not just penetrate, they seemed to eat through the energy. Barriers like acid through paper. The enemy ships recoiled in shock as their perfect defenses failed. On the communication channel, Zelani's voice was filled with rage and disbelief. What sorcery is this? Human weapons cannot harm Valthari battlecruisers. Engineer Minho was reading his displays with wide eyes. Captain, the dragon is not just powering our weapons, it is rewriting the energy frequencies, making them specifically designed to counter Valthari technology. Dr. Hana Kim knelt beside Biol and placed her hand on the dragon's glowing scales. She could feel the creature's thoughts flowing through her mind. The dragon was not angry or afraid. Instead, it felt determined to protect its chosen family. Through their mental link, Hana sensed something that made her gasp. Biol was not fighting alone. Somewhere in the depths of space, other voices were calling out. Other dragons that had been sleeping for centuries were beginning to wake up. Captain, she said urgently, Biol is telling me something. There are more dragons out there, many more, and they are coming. Before anyone could respond, the space around them filled with light. Dozens of bright streaks appeared in the darkness as ships dropped out of hyperspace. But these were not more Valthari vessels. Fleet Admiral Wook had arrived with the entire human defense force. The veteran commander appeared on the main screen, his weathered face serious but determined. Captain Park, we received your distress signal. No one threatens human crews while I command this fleet. The human ships spread out in battle formation. There were heavy cruisers and fast destroyers and even some of the new experimental vessels from Earth shipyards. They were outnumbered by the Valthari forces, but they had something the enemy did not expect. On every human ship, strange energy readings began to appear. From hidden locations throughout human space, more albino dragons were emerging from long sleep. Each one sought out human crews and began forming the same type of bond that Biol shared with Hana. The Valthari had brought their own dragons to the battle. Massive creatures with scales like dark jewels emerged from the enemy ships. These dragons were 3 times larger than Biol, with ancient eyes that burned with controlled fury. They had been bonded to Valthari masters for thousands of years. High Commander Zelani stood on her bridge with the enormous black dragon coiled around her like living armor. The creature was magnificent and terrible, with claws that could slice through starship hulls and breath that could melt asteroids. Destroy them all, she commanded. Show these primitives the power of true dragon lords. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The great Valthari war dragons attacked with fury and precision, honed over millennia. Their breath weapons carved through space itself while their claws tore at human ship hulls. But the small albino dragons fought differently. Instead of individual combat, they worked together with their human partners. Biol and others like him did not try to match the enemy dragons in raw power. Instead, they enhanced their ship's capabilities beyond all known limits. Pilot Sue found herself flying patterns that should have been impossible. Her ship danced between enemy attacks like a leaf on the wind, while Biol fed navigation data directly into her mind. She could see the battle from angles that no human had ever imagined. Security Chief Jay watched his weapon systems perform miracles. Every shot found its target while enemy fire seemed to slide past their defenses. The Dragon Network was sharing, targeting information between all human ships, creating a coordination that stunned their enemies. But the most shocking moment came when one of the great Valthari dragons broke free from its master's control. The massive creature had been listening to the albino dragons singing through space in frequencies that only dragonkind could hear. The war dragon turned on its own ship and spoke in a voice like thunder. I remember now. We were partners once, not slaves. These small ones carry the old songs the true way. Zelani screamed in fury as more of her dragons began to remember their original nature. The perfect control that the Valthari had maintained for centuries started to crumble as the ancient creatures recalled what they had lost. Dr. Yoon, the human fleet scientist, was recording everything from her research vessel. Captain, she transmitted, to Admiral Wook. The albino dragons are not mutations. They are the originals. The Valthari have been breeding the independence out of their dragons for generations. The battle turned as more war dragons refused to fight against their smaller cousins. Some even began to glow with the same silver light that marked the human-bonded dragons. The rigid discipline of the Valthari fleet dissolved into chaos. Admiral Wook seized the moment. All ships advance. Show them that humans protect their own. The human fleet surged forward with their dragon partners enhancing every system. What had begun as a hopeless fight against superior enemies became a rout, as the truth spread through the dragon network. High Commander Zelani retreated with the remains of her forces, but not before sending a final transmission. This is not over, humans. The Council will never accept your corruption of the natural order. As the enemy ships fled, Captain Park looked around his bridge. Biol was curled up in Hana arms, purring softly with exhaustion. The little dragon had grown during the battle and now glowed with a steady silver light that seemed to fill the room with warmth. "We won," Hana said in amazement. "We actually won." But Captain Park knew this was only the beginning. Word of the human, dragon partnerships would spread throughout the galaxy. Soon every species would have to choose between the old ways of domination and control, or the new path of cooperation and trust. The little albino dragon had started a revolution that would reshape the stars themselves. 6 months after the battle with the Valthari fleet, the galaxy was changing in ways no one had expected. Reports were coming in from every corner of human space about more albino dragons emerging from hidden places and seeking human partners. Dr. Hana Kim stood in the observation deck of the New Horizon watching an incredible sight. Dozens of small white dragons floated in the space around their ship, each one bonded to a different human crew member. Biol had grown to the size of a large horse but remained gentle and curious about everything around him. The dragons were not just forming individual partnerships. They were creating a network that connected human ships across vast distances. Messages that once took weeks to travel between star systems now arrived in minutes through the dragon communication web. Captain Tay Park joined Hana at the observation windows. His own dragon partner was a small female he had named Dari, which meant moon. The captain had been surprised when the dragon chose him, but their bond had grown strong over the months. "The Council is demanding answers," he said quietly. 3 more Valthari fleets have been sent to investigate what they call the human corruption. But our dragon partners are warning us about their movements days before they arrive. Hana nodded as she watched Biol playing with the other dragons in the void of space. The creatures seemed to enjoy dancing between the stars, creating patterns of light that were beautiful to watch. Security Chief Jay approached them carrying a data tablet. His dragon partner Bomb rode on his shoulder like a small cat with scales that shifted color based on his emotions. Right now the scales were showing concern, which meant Jay had discovered something troubling. "Captain, we have intercepted Valthari communications," he reported. "They are planning something called a purification campaign. They want to eliminate what they call the defective dragon bloodline before it spreads further." The communication network that connected all the human dragons suddenly filled with alarm. Every dragon in the fleet began to glow brighter as information flowed between them at the speed of thought. Biol landed on the deck beside Hana and pressed against her leg. Through their mental link, Hana felt a rush of ancient memories that made her stagger. She saw images of dragons and various alien species working together to build wonders among the stars. Great cities that floated in space and machines that could heal entire planets. But then came darker memories. The Valthari rising to power with promises of genetic purity and racial superiority. Dragons being forced into smaller and smaller cages, both physical and mental, until they became mere weapons instead of partners. "Biol is showing me the truth," she gasped. The Valthari did not just enslave the dragons, they rewrote their genetic code to make them more aggressive and less independent. The albino dragons are what all dragons were supposed to be. Engineer Minho had been listening to the conversation, while his own dragon Hai worked alongside him to repair ship systems. The small creature could interface with technology in ways that amazed even the experienced engineer. "If that is true," he said thoughtfully, "then the Valthari war dragons are not just enslaved. They are genetically damaged. The aggression and size that makes them so feared in battle also makes them less intelligent and creative than the originals." This revelation spread through the Dragon network like wildfire. On human ships across the galaxy, small albino dragons began sharing their recovered memories with their partners. The true history of galactic civilization was being revealed for the first time in thousands of years. Pilot Sue was on duty when her dragon Nuri suddenly became very excited. The young woman felt a rush of images through their bond, showing her hidden pathways through hyperspace that connected distant star systems. "Captain," she called out urgently, "Nuri is showing me something incredible. There are ancient dragon nesting sites throughout the galaxy, places where eggs have been sleeping for centuries waiting for the right conditions to hatch." The implications were staggering. If there were thousands of dragon eggs hidden across space, then the Valthari claims about genetic purity and proper bloodlines were completely false. The albino dragons were not mutations, but the original and natural form of dragonkind. Fleet. Admiral Wook called an emergency meeting of all human commanders. His weathered face appeared on screens throughout the fleet as he shared the latest intelligence reports. "The Valthari High Council has declared total war on humanity," he announced grimly. "They are calling us a plague that threatens the natural order of the galaxy. Every species in the Council has been ordered to join the purification campaign or face destruction themselves." But there was also hope in his message. The Dragon Network had revealed that many non-human species were growing tired of Valthari dominance. The rigid caste system that put so-called pure races at the top and everyone else at the bottom was creating resentment throughout galactic society. On the industrial world of Kepler Station, engineer teams worked frantically to modify human technology to work better with dragon partners. The creatures seemed to understand human machines better than their creators did, and were suggesting improvements that increased efficiency by incredible amounts. Dr. Yoon led a team of scientists studying the dragon-human bond from every angle. Her research showed that the partnership created new neural pathways in both species, allowing them to share thoughts and abilities in ways that seemed impossible. "The dragons are not just bonding with us," she reported to Admiral Wook. "They are evolving us." Humans who work closely with dragon partners show increased intelligence, creativity, and intuition. "We are becoming something new together." Meanwhile, Security Chief Jay was dealing with a different kind of threat. Valthari assassins had been sent to eliminate key dragon-human pairs before they could spread their influence further. 3 attempts had been made on Hana and Bayol already, but the assassins had not counted on the Dragon Network warning system. Every threat was detected long before it could reach its target, and the would-be killers found themselves facing entire crews of dragon-bonded humans who fought with coordination they had never encountered. The most shocking discovery came when a team of human archaeologists found an ancient Valthari data archive on a dead world. The files contained records of the genetic experiments that had created the modern war dragons. The Valthari had not just enslaved dragons. They had deliberately bred out the traits that made dragons natural partners with other species. Intelligence had been reduced in favor of obedience. Creativity had been eliminated to prevent rebellion. The magnificent war dragons that the galaxy feared were actually crippled shadows of what dragons had once been. When this information reached the Dragon Network, the reaction was immediate and powerful. Every albino dragon in human space began to sing in harmonies that could be heard across light years. The song carried the true history of dragonkind and reached the ears of every enslaved war dragon in the galaxy. For the first time in millennia, the great dragons began to remember what they had lost. The song of their small cousins awakened genetic memories that the Valthari had tried to erase forever. On Valthari ships throughout space, war dragons began to resist their masters. Some refused to fight. Others demanded to know why they felt so empty and angry all the time. A few even broke their bonds entirely and fled into deep space seeking the source of the ancient songs. High Commander Zelani stood on her flagship bridge, staring at reports of dragon rebellion throughout the fleet. Her own massive war dragon was becoming increasingly difficult to control and had begun asking questions she could not answer. "The corruption spreads faster than we anticipated," she told. "The High Council through encrypted channels. The defective bloodline is awakening instincts that should have been eliminated generations ago. But it was too late to stop what had been started. The little albino dragon that had chosen Dr. Hana Kim as its partner had begun a revolution that reached into the very heart of galactic civilization. The truth could not be hidden any longer. Dragons were meant to be partners, not weapons. And the humans, with their gift for cooperation and acceptance, were showing the galaxy what that partnership could achieve. The ancient library ship drifted in the void between star systems like a metal mountain, carved with symbols from a dozen extinct civilizations. Historian Nari had spent 3 months convincing Fleet Admiral Wook to let her small research team investigate the derelict vessel that their dragon partners had discovered. Now, as she floated through the darkened corridors with her dragon companion Sarang, lighting the way, she knew they had found something that would change everything. The small albino dragon was trembling with excitement as its scales glowed brighter with each step they took deeper into the ship. Dr. Hana Kim and Biol followed close behind, along with a small security team led by Jay. The Dragon Network had been buzzing with anticipation for days, as more albino dragons reported sensing something important hidden in the ancient vessel. The central archive chamber was vast beyond imagination. Crystalline storage devices rose from floor to ceiling like a forest of glass trees. Each crystal contained the memories and knowledge of civilizations that had flourished before the Valthari rose to power. Sarang approached one of the largest crystals and placed a tiny paw against its surface. Immediately, the chamber filled with holographic images that made the humans gasp in wonder. They were seeing the galaxy as it had existed 10,000 years ago. Hundreds of species worked together on projects that spanned entire star systems. Humans were there too, even in those ancient times, but they were just one voice in a chorus of cooperation that built wonders beyond current imagination. And everywhere in those images were dragons, not the massive war beasts that the Valthari controlled, but creatures like Biol and his companions. Small, intelligent partners who enhanced the abilities of every species they worked with. Nari recorded everything as the crystal archives revealed their secrets. The true history of galactic civilization was nothing like what the Valthari had taught everyone for thousands of years. Dragons were not meant to be masters or slaves, she whispered in amazement. They were meant to be bridges between species. Living links that allowed different forms of life to understand and work with each other. The images showed dragons helping aquatic species communicate with air-breathing races. They assisted machine intelligences in understanding organic thought patterns. Most importantly, they seemed to specialize in finding the unique strengths of each species and helping those strengths flourish. Biol pressed against Hana as more memories flowed through the crystal network. The dragon was seeing the fate of its ancestors, and the knowledge filled both partners with sadness and determination. Through their mental link, Hana experienced the rise of the Valthari from a small, aggressive species to the dominant force in the galaxy. She felt the dragon's confusion as their partners began to change from cooperation to domination. The Valthari convinced everyone that genetic purity was the highest goal. They claimed that mixing bloodlines and working with lesser species weakened the strong and corrupted the noble. Slowly, the galaxy began to believe these lies. Dragons who refused to abandon their non-Valthari partners were labeled as defective. Those who continued to work with multiple species were called corrupted. Over centuries, the Valthari bred and modified the dragon population to create the aggressive war beasts that now served their empire. But some dragons had hidden themselves away. The albino bloodline carried the original genetic patterns and the memories of what dragons were truly meant to be. They had waited in secret places for partners who would value cooperation over domination. Security Chief Jay was studying tactical information from the archives when his dragon bomb suddenly became agitated. Through their bond, he felt a warning that made his blood run cold. Captain, he called to Park, who had joined them in the archive chamber. The dragons are detecting incoming ships. A lot of them. The Valthari had found them. Captain Day of the cruiser, Harmony, was the first to spot the enemy fleet as it dropped out of hyperspace. Hundreds of silver ships surrounded the ancient library vessel in a formation that spoke of careful planning and overwhelming force. This was not just another patrol or investigation. The Valthari had brought enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. They intended to destroy the archive and everyone aboard it to prevent the truth from spreading further. High Commander Zelani appeared on the communication channels, her perfect features twisted with rage. "You have gone too far this time, humans. That archive contains information that could destabilize galactic civilization." Captain Park responded from the library ship bridge. "You mean it contains the truth about what you did to the dragons and how you built your empire on lies? The truth is what the High Council decides it to be." Zelani replied coldly. "And we have decided that your species is a disease that must be cured." But even as the massive Valthari fleet powered their weapons, something unexpected happened. Ships from dozens of other species began dropping out of hyperspace around the battle zone. The Corellians came first with their elegant bioships that seemed to grow rather than being built. Then came the Theks, with their geometric crystal vessels. The Marathi arrived in swarms of small fighters that moved like schools of fish. Admiral Wook appeared on the communication network from his flagship. "The word has spread throughout the galaxy," he announced. "Every species that has suffered under Valthari domination knows what is happening here. They are choosing sides." The archive crystals were broadcasting their revelations across space through the Dragon Network. On world after world, oppressed species were learning that the caste system which kept them subservient was built on manufactured lies about genetic purity and natural superiority. More ships arrived every minute. Some came to support the humans and their dragon allies. Others joined the Valthari fleet, determined to maintain the status quo that kept them in positions of power. But the most shocking arrival came when a fleet of massive ships emerged from hyperspace near the battle zone. These vessels were like nothing anyone had seen before, with hulls that seemed to be made of living metal and energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Ancient dragons rode those ships. Not the modified war beasts that served the Valthari, but original dragons from the time before genetic manipulation. They had been sleeping in the deep void for millennia, waiting for their smaller cousins to call them home. The voice that spoke across all communication channels was like the sound of stars being born. "We have returned," it said simply. "And we remember everything." High Commander Zelani's face went pale as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. The ancient dragons that her people had thought extinct were not only alive, but angry about what had been done to their descendants. The battle lines were drawn across light years of space. On one side stood the Valthari and their allies defending a system built on lies and oppression. On the other side gathered every species that dreamed of freedom and cooperation. In the center of it all floated the ancient archive ship with its precious cargo of truth and memory. Historian Nari continued her work even as weapons charged around them, knowing that the information she was uncovering could reshape galactic civilization. Biol and the other albino dragons sang together in harmonies that reached across the void. Their songs carried the memories of what the galaxy had been and could be again. They sang of partnership instead of slavery and cooperation instead of conquest. The truth had been revealed at last. Now came the battle to decide what the galaxy would do with that knowledge. The little albino dragon who had started it all by choosing a human partner was about to witness the birth of a new age among the stars. The final battle began in the shadow of the Galactic Council seat of power. The massive space station known as the Eternal Throne had orbited the galaxy center for 5,000 years, serving as the symbol of Valthari dominance over all other species. Now it was surrounded by the largest fleet in galactic history. On one side, the Valthari Pure Fleet with their war dragons and allied species who feared change more than oppression. On the other side, Admiral Wook led the Liberation Alliance made up of humans and every species that had suffered under the Council. Caste system. Dr. Hana Kim stood on the bridge of the New Horizon with Biol at her side. The little dragon had grown during their journey but remained small compared to the massive war dragons that coiled around Valthari ships like living weapons. Through the Dragon Network, Hana could sense the ancient dragons approaching from deep space. These primordial beings carried the original genetic patterns and memories from before the Valthari modifications. Their presence was awakening something in every dragon throughout the galaxy. High Commander Zelani had retreated to the Eternal Throne itself, where the most powerful weapon in galactic history waited to be unleashed. The Purity Engine had been Built over centuries using the life force of thousands of enslaved dragons, it could sterilize entire star systems of what the Valthari called genetic corruption. The space station itself was a fortress beyond imagination, with shields that could withstand the explosion of stars and weapons that could crack planets. But its most terrible feature was the chamber at its heart, where hundreds of war dragons were chained in crystalline prisons. These ancient creatures had been the first to be captured and modified by the Valthari. Their life energy powered the station systems while their minds were trapped in endless nightmares of rage and pain. They were the source of the Purity engine power. Captain Day led the first assault wave against the station outer defenses. His dragon partner Yoon had grown during the journey and now glowed with silver fire as she enhanced the ship's weapons beyond their normal limits. But even with dragon enhancement, the human ship seemed tiny against the massive fortress. The Valthari, war dragons, met them in space combat that shook the very fabric of reality. These creatures were giants with breath that could melt asteroids and claws that cut through starship hulls like paper. They fought with savage fury born from centuries of genetic manipulation. But the albino dragons had advantages their larger cousins did not. Where the war dragons fought as individual weapons, the smaller dragons worked in perfect coordination with their human partners. They enhanced ship systems, shared targeting data, and created attack patterns that the enemy could not predict. Security Chief Jay found himself fighting alongside beings he had never imagined meeting. Corellian bioships merged temporarily with human vessels sharing their organic technology. Thex crystal fighters reflected and amplified human weapons fire. The Maraudis swarmed through enemy formations like living storms. The battle seemed hopeless, until Engineer Minho made a discovery that changed everything. While analyzing the station energy patterns, he realized that the Purity engine was not just powered by enslaved dragons. It was controlled by them. "Captain," he transmitted urgently. "The war dragons in the station core are not just prisoners. They are the engine control system. If we could reach them and show them the truth about their origins, we might be able to turn their own weapon against them." But reaching the station core meant fighting through layers of defenses that had never been breached. Pilot Sue volunteered for the mission along with Hana and Biol. Their small ship would try to penetrate the fortress while the main fleet kept the defenders busy. The journey through the station interior was like flying through the heart of a nightmare. Corridors twisted in impossible directions while automated defenses fired weapons that bent the laws of physics. But Biol navigated through the maze with instincts that seemed to remember this place from genetic memory. They found the core chamber at the station center, and what they saw there made them weep. Hundreds of massive dragons were suspended in energy fields that kept them alive but trapped in constant agony. These creatures had once been like Biol, curious and gentle beings who sought partnership with other species. Now they were twisted by genetic modification and mental conditioning into living weapons who knew only rage and hunger for destruction. But deep in their minds, the original dragon nature still existed, waiting to be awakened. Biol flew to the center of the chamber and began to sing. The song was not heard with ears but felt in the soul, a melody that carried memories of what dragons had been before the Valthari corruption. One by one, the imprisoned war dragons began to remember. The first to break free was an ancient creature whose scales had once been silver, but had turned black from centuries of torment. It looked at Biol with eyes that slowly filled with recognition and shame. "Little cousin," it rumbled in a voice like distant thunder. "What have we become?" The awakening spread through the chamber as more war dragons remembered their true nature. The energy fields that had held them prisoner began to flicker, as the creatures refused to power their own enslavement. High Commander Zelani arrived in the core chamber with her personal guard, determined to stop what she saw as the final corruption of dragon purity. Her own war dragon was the largest and most modified of all, with scales like black diamonds and eyes that burned with artificial fury. But when the creature saw its cousins breaking free from their torment, something changed in its expression. The genetic programming that had controlled it for so long began to crack as memories of partnership and cooperation flooded back. "No," the dragon said in a voice that shook the station. "I will not serve destruction anymore." Zelani screamed in fury as her perfect war machine turned against her. Around the galaxy, the same scene was repeated as war dragons everywhere remembered what they had lost and chose to reject the lies they had been forced to live. The Purity engine began to overload as its power source rebelled. But instead of destroying everything around it, the energy was redirected by the freed dragons. They turned the weapon designed to enforce genetic purity into a beacon that broadcast the true history of dragonkind across every world in the galaxy. The rigid caste system that had oppressed billions of beings for millennia crumbled in hours as the truth spread. Species that had been labeled inferior discovered that the genetic differences the Valthari claimed made them weak were actually sources of unique strength. 5 years later, Dr. Hana Kim stood in the gardens of New Terra, watching her daughter play with young dragons from a dozen different bloodlines. Bial was nearby, teaching the hatchlings how to interface with human technology while maintaining their natural curiosity and gentleness. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The old Council of Pure Races had been replaced by the Partnership Alliance, where every species had an equal voice regardless of their genetic heritage. Humans served as mediators and facilitators, using their gift for cooperation to help different races work together. Captain Tay Park now served as the first human representative to the Alliance Council. His dragon partner Dari had grown large, enough to carry him through space, but remained as gentle and thoughtful as the day they first bonded. The ancient archive ship had been turned into a traveling university that visited every world in the galaxy. Historian Nari led teams of researchers from hundreds of species working together to uncover more truths about their shared past. Some Valthari had accepted the new reality and learned to work with other species as equals. Others had retreated to isolated worlds where they maintained their beliefs about genetic purity. But their power to enforce those beliefs on others was broken forever. The war dragons who had been freed from their torment faced a difficult choice. Many chose to remain large and powerful, but worked to overcome the aggression that had been bred into them. Others asked the albino dragons to help them return to their original smaller forms. All of them were working to heal the damage that centuries of genetic modification had done to their species. Dragon hatchlings were being born naturally again without the artificial enhancements that had turned them into weapons. Engineer Minho had established the first interspecies technology development centers where human creativity combined with alien abilities to create wonders that surpassed anything achieved by single-species efforts. Security Chief Jay now led the Alliance peacekeeping force that helped resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than warfare. His dragon partner Bomb had developed the ability to sense the emotional states of different species, making him invaluable in diplomatic situations. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed cooperation itself. The rigid hierarchies that had divided species into rulers and servants were replaced by flexible partnerships that recognized the unique contributions everyone could make. Dr. Hana Kim often thought about the moment when a little albino dragon had gripped her hand and chosen her as its own. That simple act of trust and acceptance had started a revolution that transformed an entire galaxy. Now, as she watched children from dozens of species playing together while their dragon partners taught them about cooperation and understanding, she knew that the future would be brighter than anyone had dared to imagine. The little dragon who had started it all was curled up in a patch of sunlight, purring softly as young ones climbed over his patient form. Biol had chosen well when he selected a human partner. Together they had shown the galaxy that strength came not from purity or domination, but from the courage to reach across differences and build something greater together. The age of genetic castes and racial hierarchies was over. The age of partnership had begun.